Welcome to Meet the Masters. I'm Tim Watson. Today I'm joined by Master Kelly Goodwin. How are you, ma'am?
Just fine, thanks.
Thanks for joining me. I've seen on Facebook you have been a jet setter and you've been around the world lately. Could you maybe start and tell us some of the things that you've been doing in the Tong Soo Do world?
Well, I just got back from the European Masters camp in Nottingham, England, and it was fantastic. Um, uh, Grandmaster Khan does such a great job there, and everyone was so wonderful and it was inspiring, and their technique was amazing. I came back just really jazzed and buoyed up and filled up with Tong Soo Do spirit. It was fantastic.
That's awesome. Is that your first time visiting that clinic, or have you been there before?
I've been to visit England before. That was my third time there training with them. My first time at the European Masters clinic. Was there, I think, in 2015 for work, and I stopped by, and I was there in maybe 2002-ish. For 6 weeks, I trained. I was doing a sabbatical over there for work, and I trained in Coventry. And so I've trained with the group a few times, but first time I was there for the clinic, and it was really just lovely.
That's awesome. They were, when I've done these interviews, they've been huge supporters of me. And it was funny at World Championships, a couple of them came up to me and was like, "Oh, you're the Zoom master," including Master Bernardi's wife. She was like, "I'm so excited to meet you." And I got to meet Master Noreen Khan in person, and getting to meet some of the people and the masters that I got a chance to talk to, Master Carter and Master Whiskey and Master, I talked to Master Butcher, but he wasn't there. And just getting a chance to see them live and in person was an awesome experience.
It was wonderful watching them test. My goodness, the skill was just phenomenal, and the spirit, and everyone's so kind, and it was really, really, really great.
Awesome. You got a chance. You got to go to Scotland too on that trip as well.
Yeah, that was for vacation, so that was really amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I haven't made it to Europe yet, so that all of those things, the Masters Clinic and just England, all those places are definitely on my list of places that I want to go.
But you must have been having a lot of fun. How many people have you met now?
As far as doing all the interviews,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that this is my 78th interview.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, it's really cool. Like I said, I don't remember offhand how many of the UK Masters, but like the Europe, I talked to Master Marco early on. I did one with Master Khan, Master Don Khan, Noreen, Master Carter, Master Butcher, Master Silk. So it's really cool, and obviously lots of our U.S. friends as well. Lots of Region 8 guys. I've got to talk to both Marshes, Master Marsh, Claire Marsh, and Patrick Marsh. It's been really cool. It's been a lot of history, and one of the things that Grandmaster Strong likes about it is sharing the history and the stories of the people that have been here, not just from the beginning. There are some of those people, but the people that have been a part of the history, which you obviously are as well. So I'm excited to get a chance to talk about your background and things that you have been a part of. So let's talk about your path to the World Tong Soo Do Association and how you got started in the martial arts and what led you to Tong Soo Do.
Oh gosh. Well, I was an undergrad, and I'm not sure what led me there. I remember seeing a style I didn't join, training outside, and honestly, it's been so long ago, I can't remember how I ended up with the style I started with. Probably one of those luck things. Offered in the rec center, I was started in the University of Florida in, yes, 1986, in Taekwondo, and it was Murukan Taekwondo. So through the Richard Chun lineage. And then what was unique about them, they also trained Aikido simultaneously. So you had parallel required paths. So you did Aikido as its separate art, but it was required to move up in Aikido simultaneously as you were doing Taekwondo. So yeah, it was intense, but you know, as an undergrad, you just have so much more free time. You know, my weekends were, you know, 6 hours of Aikido every weekend, and you know, another 12, 15 hours of Taekwondo. And, you know, between teaching, we had to, the teaching was a little bit different. By the time you got to black belt, you were a certified instructor. So you were doing a lot of assistant teaching through the GUP ranks, but certainly starting at what we would do as red belt and through Chodombo. By Chodombo, you were teaching classes pretty much independently. So by the time you got a black belt, you were an instructor. So yeah, I mean, those roots were really, really, really important for me. And then when I went to graduate school, moving from Florida to California, there wasn't, you know, Caltech is a very small school, and there was Shotokan there, very high level Shotokan. Master Oshima was teaching there, he was an instructor Funakoshi. But it was so different for me, you know, to like change my front stances and everything. And so I ended up training Aikido for about a year. And then a Tungsudo school started, a club started at Caltech, and myself and Sabin and William Glenn were the first two students of Caltech Tungsudo. And I think the rest is history. I actually trained with Tungsudo for about 2 years before I tested in, because it, you know, just felt, you know, it felt weird to give up, or, you know, the issue of loyalty, like, is this the right thing to do? And eventually I got the blessing, like, you know, you're there, you're busy, you're in graduate school, you're not going to start a club at that point. And so I did test in after about 2 years. And then I started my first club as a postdoc. That's went up to the San Francisco, the Bay Area. And so that's when I first started a Tungsudo club.
So who was your instructor, the first instructor there at Caltech?
You mean in
Tungsudo.
when I was at Caltech?
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a variety of instructors. So the person who started the Caltech club, he was a JPL employee, and his name is Chris Pasqualino. And then, but they were from the Irvine. They came out of University of Irvine, and so that lineage is still, you know, old original Region 1. Mark Schoenberger was one of my first instructors, because even though I was at Caltech in Pasadena, I was stationed for part of the time at the Marine Laboratory in Corona del Mar. So I actually trained with the University of Irvine Club quite a bit early on. And there was that whole sort of San Diego, Southern California crew, and the Marshes, and Master DePaul and Master Purnell, all of them, you know, I consider sort of original instructors from when I was in graduate school. And then when I moved to the Bay Area, I used to every weekend drive across the bridge and train with Master DeBaca, Master Stein. So I had a lot of rich history. And then when I got my first job in Miami, I used to go out every 6 weeks or so and go to Georgia and train with Master St. James. So I had the benefit of having a lot, I would say, tongue to instructors, just because my job kept me on the move, and I always ended up somewhat isolated in some ways, which meant I had to travel and meet lots of different people and train with lots of people.
That's awesome. And those names that you said, you know, are all amazing instructors. I've gotten the chance. So I've gotten a chance to talk to Master Tabaka, which was amazing. Master Stein and Master Purnell, Master Marsh.
Grandmaster Stein, sorry.
Grandmaster Stein. Yes, ma'am. Which, yes, yeah, he's such a, I didn't know him personally until I did an interview with him, and he's such a sweet guy. He always makes a point when he sees me now to come up and say hello, which is awesome. But talking to them, I've got the feeling that they were pretty intense when it came to their training, and I'm sure that their teaching wasn't that different. So it sounds like, you know, you went from your original training and they were very much along those same lines of intense training. Am I correct to assume that?
It was really inspiring. I would say the main difference from the move is I think people were generally, there was a lot more openness to families. You know, it is different coming from a college.
Sure.
You know, that's a really different, I mean, where your students are only those people who are in their prime, and that's all you ever see. It is a little bit different than people who are used to working with families as their clients and stakeholders. And at first that was a hard transition, but of course, you know, I've absolutely grown to cherish that as one of the things we do that's really special, in that we manage to keep our good technical skill, but are very compassionate and open and supportive of all kinds of different people. And from our youngest participants to our oldest participants, you know, it's not that many organizations can do that and be so inclusive with regard to age and capability, and still bring out the best of every individual. And so, you know, I'd love to see us cater. You know, I'd love to see some of our young people go out there and start more college clubs for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a great demographic that I think we used to have more of a share of the market. You know, it's a little bit harder now as more and more non-traditional martial arts, as we're competing in that marketplace for that age group. One of the things that we've done that I think was genius is, you know, starting to grow our own, and you know, going back to what I saw in England, you know, some of the people I got to see test are homegrown. You know, we started them as tiny little tigers and dragons, and you know, that's one way to grow absolutely phenomenal martial artists in both technique and spirit and humility and all of that. But it would be nice to see us, if we could, you know, claim some more market share against some of that mixed martial arts. I think is really where you see a lot of the youth are going now. But the fact that we are able to do what we do and maintain that technical capability, and yet cater to families in a really supportive and nurturing way, I just cherish that. I think that's something that's absolutely phenomenal about our organization, and we really should be so proud of that, because it's not easy to do.
No, I agree. It is not easy. And I understand exactly where you're coming from. I started when I was 20, and I started in a college town, and everyone that I trained with were either late teens or like early 20s. And I just remember on Thursday nights we had a sparring class, and I still have very fond memories of that class. And just getting my backside handed to me on a regular basis, and just coming back for more, like even as a color belt, it was, so much fun. And uh, being one of Master Godwin's students would have guys like Master Malbrook show up. And, my original instructor was Master George Maybroda. And just, yeah, so I love that. And I still try to nurture that with the guys who have, we've got some great teams at our studio who are now 17, 18, 19, that are great fighters and, love to spar, but are also well-rounded because they've been in the studio for so long. And it's nice when they try to have both, right? Like they're well-rounded, but when it's time to, train hard, they train hard as well. And then even some of those guys, their mothers and fathers train as well. So I'm with you. I love that. We have Don testing next Saturday, and there are 3 mothers that are like that train with their families, that are 2 that are going for black belt, 1 that's going for Edon, and 2 of them have kids that are testing with them as well. So it's just, I love that. And obviously my wife trains and both my kids are black belts. So I'm a big proponent of that part of our association. And I agree with you wholeheartely.
Yeah. And it is, that's such a good point. And, I hope we all can provide that to our students, right? The ability to take people who are coming in 40s and 50s and maybe a little bit more hesitant, and yet still cater to our 17 to 20 somethings and let them be able to lay it down and not worry, and then also cater to our kids who just got out of braces, and the parents really want to see that investment not get harmed. And I think that being able to give that individual layered experience is a real challenge for an instructor or for a club, and especially when your livelihood's on the line and the liability issues, but at the same time we are a contact sport. And when I started, groin was open, and I used to love that as a short person. That was awesome. I definitely had my nose broken multiple times. Luckily I was at college. My mom would have been aghast at the things we did, right? But it's really important to be able to take a hit.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. It's difficult because it's also different, knocking out a 20-year-old. You don't want to be knocking out a 10-year-old,
Right.
And now that we have, such a difference in our understanding about concussions and things like that, it's a different world, and it's tricky. It's really tricky giving people the experience they need to be able to wear a black belt with confidence, and yet maintain safety, mental, emotional, spiritual safety, physical safety. It's not easy what we do. It's really not.
I agree, but it's something that I take great pride in, and I'm sure you do as well. What inspired you to start your own club? I think you said shortly after you got your black belt.
Oh no, it wasn't after I got my black belt. It was certainly after it was shortly after I got my PhD.
Your PhD, that's what I was.
Yeah.
So you had extra time available now that your PhD was done.
Yeah. What made me start a club as a postdoc? I have no idea that looking back, it's like, well, yeah, that is kind of crazy. I just didn't think twice about it. It was just, it was just like, oh, I'm by myself. The thing to do is to start a club. Uh, yeah, it just seemed like, of course, that's what I do now, right? There's no one else immediately around me, so I need to start this myself. I don't know. I guess that's a really good question. I don't know what makes you do things. That's like asking someone, what made you decide to get a tattoo? Half the time they're like, I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. As the same thing when Master Godwin asked me, I was a part-time instructor. He asked me, what's your goal? I said, I want to be a full-time instructor. And he's like, what's your time frame? And I said, I'll put my 2 weeks in tomorrow. I don't have a good reason and I did. And I don't, I followed my gut and my heart. Like, that's what I wanted to do. So I totally understand that. So the club that you started, is that the one? What club was that? Is that the one that you are now? Is that Coastal Canyon or?
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
I've had so many clubs.
Okay.
That one was called San Francisco Peninsula Tongsudo.
Okay.
And then from there, my postdoc, once it was done, then I moved to Florida and I started a club in Miami, and then I started another one, then ended up starting another one closer to our house, which was in Hollywood. And then I moved back to California. I would say Coastal Canyon, well, this is the longest place I've lived.
Okay.
Maybe ever. I think we've been here 15 years. I think that's the longest place I've lived anywhere my whole life. So this would be the longest running club. But yeah, I got pretty good at starting clubs back in the day. Actually, we started one here when we first got here, or I guess when I first got here. I started one at a Montessori school that I ended up giving to Miguel Soto, and that's still running. And then the rec center that we're in now, it opened. So I've been there since before that rec center was written. And it's one of those things, like, why sometimes you just know. I remember very clearly looking in the little local paper that this rec center was going to open, and I just knew I need to be there on the ground floor. Sometimes you just know, in your gut, you just know. I've had that happen a few times, like even like with volume 6, with with the reason I ended up being editor. I can remember clear as day. I remember where I was standing in the gym. I remember I was in the gym in Huntsville, in North Alabama, and I was standing in the hallway out to the bathrooms, and I was looking across, and Grandmaster Shin was standing by the drum, and he had talked about the book and everything, and I just was hit with this, like, a premonition, or this feeling like he needs my help. And I went to him, and he and I were in the elevator by ourselves, and I said, would you like, I can help you edit if you want. And he had said, oh, well, everyone's got their assignments, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I know, but when it all comes together, don't you need someone to put all the different chapters together and make sure it has sort of like a similar voice, blah, blah, blah. And he had this look on his face. He said, yeah, yes, you do that. And I was like, great. And then, at the end of the clinic thing, I was sitting in the audience, and then he announces, and he's like, Kelly's going to do this editing thing, and it'll be, the book will be available this time next year. And I was like, what? I had no idea at the timeline or anything, but yeah, it was a premonition, because if we hadn't done that, he got to see the proofs, he held the proofs. He didn't get to see the bound book, but he did see the proofs. And I don't think we would have gotten it done before he passed. And so sometimes sometimes the universe just tells you, just guides you.
Wow, it's amazing. And I'm trying to think, I'm sure I have I don't know if I have it in this office, but it's not a small book. And it's got a lot of information in it. And it's just, I knew you were part of editing and working on the book, but to know that you more or less knocked it out in a year is just mind-boggling.
Oh, it was actually less than a year, because by the time, I got the photos and everybody started to get their chapters to me. Like the first part, I worked like forever on just like the first part, because I didn't have pictures. I didn't have people's copy. The last chapter, the last form to get done was Unsu and Korean, and that didn't get finished until Masters Camp. And so literally I didn't really start to get copy until January of, and then it had to be out. It was available by Worlds that year. And the other thing, I love Gideon, but I will again remember where I was sitting at my computer. I'm talking to him about InDesign, and he'd done a lot of Adobe work with photos, and I'm going, yeah, I was not an Adobe user previously, and neither were any of the authors, right? I mean, they could do Word, but nobody did Adobe. No one knew how to edit in PDFs or exchange those sorts of formats. So I'm going, well, yeah, I'm trying to do this InDesign thing. I'm talking to him, and he's like, well, yeah, no, I don't know. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't know? And then I have this realization, like, he's never used this software. And it dawns on me that neither one of us know what we're doing. And so we've committed to this software that neither one of us knows how to use. And if Adobe is very powerful, but it's not an easy learning curve. I mean, you have to really invest time. And I just started laughing, and I said, one day this will be funny. Right now, it was not funny at the time, right? Because, I run a school, I have a full-time job, and I'm facing, typesetting, because really the editing has always been so joyful, but I cannot say the same thing for typesetting when, you're learning from zero. And so really we started, beginning of typesetting was like January. And I pulled more all-nighters getting that book out than I'd had. And I don't even know. I mean, I had so little sleep getting that done. It was quite the production. It was really kind of funny. It was just absolutely blind, leading the blind. And, Gideon was like, this will save the association lots of money. We're gonna publish in-house. And now we publish in-house routinely. Now it's, it's easy for us as an association to publish in-house, but that, to take on a brand new book, whole cloth, as our first, really serious in-house publishing was, looking back on it, quite amusing.
Looking at the list that you sent me, you were editor on, so talk me through this. Once the volume 6 was done, did you go back and do the 4th edition of volume 3, volume 2, 2nd edition, volume 1? You mentioned to me earlier that there weren't any copies that were digital before that. Was that hand in hand?
So what we've been doing as copies went out of print, as the association ran out of stock, okay, that's what would get us to do a new edition. And so, okay, before Gideon came on, and before volume 6, and then also those editions, I think it was like the 2015 Gup and Don manuals. We didn't own our own copies. We hadn't typeset our own copies, so we didn't have like digital copies of these works. They were typeset the old-fashioned way, like if you ever heard of camera ready copy. I mean, in the old days, you printed something, you set it up, maybe you taped it. I mean, my PhD thesis was like that, where I literally took the figures and taped them on and taped the figure captions and photocopied. That's how old I am. A camera ready copy was you set it up and you took a picture. That's what camera ready copy meant before the era of digital publication. And so there either would have been notes and stuff like that, but the actual original pages that turned into a published product, we didn't have them. They didn't exist. So now routinely, as something has gone out of print, that's when a new edition comes out. So the latest one is volume 3. And so, for example, if you don't own an original version of that, you're too bad. You should try to get one, right? Those original editions, once they're gone, they're gone. And those are really valuable because they have pictures. Like I was telling people in European Masters Clinic, like those are ones that have Grandmaster Khan's photos. So if you don't own one,
Right.
I'd love to see like the eBay prices on some of these original ones go up to $400, $500 a copy. Get a signed edition with Grandmaster Khan's signature. And so and even then, those original photos weren't necessarily digital photos either. So now we have digital photos, we have digital editing, which are much better yet. At volume 3 in particular, Master West, who just deserves to talk about an unsung hero. The amount of hours he has spent taking and editing photos, but he did all the editing one by one. Some of the early things like volume 6, we learned a lot. Those were done in batch, and they're a little small, and the resolution wasn't as good as we do now. Master West in volume 3 edited every single photo manually. So just enormous amount of work that is behind the scenes in producing a book.
Wow. He's a master that I have not gotten a chance to talk to, and I definitely want to get a chance to interview him and talk to him about that, and obviously his long tenured career as a martial artist.
Because he's a charter member. So definitely, yeah.
It's funny, interesting side note. My wife was in, I forget which, it was the volume 3. She was part of the One Step Sparring, and she still has, Maggie gave her physical copies of the pictures that they took. So she has pictures of her and Stephanie Mabrook now. Stephanie Mabrook was her then. And years ago, she used to get at Worlds, she would get recognized as the lady in the One Step pictures.
Oh, see someone else to get signed copies.
That's right.
Put them on eBay. I'm telling you, maybe we could. I see a fundraiser.
There you go.
Somewhere. Yeah.
That's awesome.
You find old students who have them on their shelves, and
yeah, that's funny. I'm thinking, I'm like, I wonder which volumes I have. I mean, we've had them for years at this point. We have all of them, but I never really thought of it that way. But a couple years ago, Aaron tracked down one of Huang Qi's books, and they're very few and far between, and add another 30 or 40 years and Grandmaster Shin's books will be the same. So it's interesting to think of that.
Yep. And you don't realize one of the reasons, those old copies are so rare is because they didn't exist digitally. So yeah, definitely people should be out perusing and trying to get original editions and get some signatures. And one of the things I really value about what you're doing, several of the masters I worked with in Volume 6, Master Casarano has passed, Master K has passed, Grandmaster Shin has passed. You don't know at the time how precious the conversations you're having are. And so for me, I look back at that experience, even though, I already told you about the parts that were, horrible by myself, watching the sun come up yet again, trying to figure out how to get like this paragraph to like indent, 2 spaces or something like that. But it was all worth it on so many levels. One, just working with all the masters that I got to work with, and then to have that turn into, precious memories for people who aren't with us anymore. And then, getting to watch Grandmaster Shin and other people deal with variation. Like, this is one of the things that was just fascinating about watching that process happen, is that watching Grandmaster Shin, he had very firm opinions, obviously, and he was really clear, this is my book. And yet he still allowed people to be right in their own way. It was really interesting to watch him navigate giving people autonomy, and yet, maintaining that position of leadership and management. And I learned a lot by watching him do that. And I think I understood better too, the way he would, travel regions, and maybe like in region 8, he would say, this is this way. And then he would go and then nod his head and say yes to things that other people were doing that might not have been exactly the same in region 8, because it was, I think, this is my opinion, more important. There are many ways to be right. And he understood how to, when things needed to come within, so like the standard deviation or, those error bars, and when it was more important just to say, yes, that's good job.
Yeah, it really is. When you think of all of the people that he worked with throughout the years and the different backgrounds they had, whether it was martial arts, where they lived, and he was able to foster this association and build it to where it is now. Whereas we're looking at 10 years later since his passing, and we're still all here. And, some people come and go, but I still think a lot of people appreciate his vision and the things that he did for them, and they continue to pass that on to the next generation, which I think it's amazing, because it's such a big part of my life, and it sounds like the same for you.
Yeah. And for it to put in there, working with Grandmaster Goodwin, and so he was a big part of the new edition of Volume 3, and his vision is in that volume. There are several elements in there, things that were done in the new edition that reflected his viewpoint, his martial arts perspective, and you just wish you knew at the time that you were talking to someone maybe for these might be the last 10 minutes we have together,
Right.
And so that has been still worth all the work in the world, is to just be able to sit with someone and see their perspective or their vision or their, if you're talking about someone who's has so much experience on the ground, they come to their impression and their vision or their attitude about a technique or an approach through experience. You know, they didn't read about it, they lived it. And, you know, one of the things in volume 3, well, one of the things we did in volume 3, which, you know, I'll claim intellectual property rights on this one, was finally sort of separating the books from the manuals, so that the manuals, you know, as far as like, this is what is required. You know, you look at the new volume 3 and it is more generic about what is due at a certain level, because you realize that the books need to really last, and you know, let the manuals be where you go to requirements, and those can change as the association's needs change.
Sure.
So you'll see some differences there, but one of the things that it is a primary difference in this edition of volume 3, you know, if you look carefully, if you want to have a good time, a lot of Easter eggs in volume 3 in particular, you know, sort of looking side by side. Grandmaster Goodwin was a big believer that 2 and 3 step experience in your 1 steps, you know, being able to do it on both sides, particularly, you know, 2 steps that you'd be able to do left, right, and 3 step sparring were not advanced. Those should be introduced really early. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective and something to keep in mind, you know, for those that are now looking at those new requirements, that you don't need all 30 as early. Grandmaster Bowen was like, well, yeah, because you're so busy perfecting them, being able to do them left and right, being able to do them in 3 step, being able to do them in a dynamic way. He did not believe that that started at black belt. He believed that that was something that should be introduced quite early. So a little, you know, insider, you know, behind the scenes there. That was just something extraordinary to be a part of, and to be able to hear his opinion on that.
That's awesome. It makes me want to, I'm going to have to buy a new edition of the 3rd manual, or at least get one for the dojang and check that out. I encourage anyone, if you don't have copies of the books, to get them. They're just a source of endless knowledge. I don't know if I've read through every single one of them, you know, from front to back, but I have consulted much of the information in it many times. One of the inspirations of doing these interviews was, so January of 2020, unfortunately, Grandmaster Bowen passed away, and we went up for his funeral, and then everything the world shut down in March, and it was that reason, like wanting to talk to people before they're gone, to have those, what you talked about, to have those moments and have those the chances to talk to people. I'm sure like you said, you had a great time at the European Masters Clinic, but there were probably very few times where you were able to sit down and talk to someone for an extended period of time. And that's where these conversations can't happen there. So it's awesome. They've happened much less this year, but I'm still, yeah, I've been talking with Grandmaster Strong about continuing to do these, because there's still some people whose voices need to be heard and documented. You know, so yeah, it's cool to hear that part of the book, right? Because it's definitely not something that I thought about. But to hear you talk about it, it's really awesome, and obviously special to you, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I hope you can get some of the perspectives of like South America and Africa as well. I know, South America, you might need a translator, but there's some, there's some deep, rich history there as well. And I'm really interested in hearing about people who chose our art in places that are flung across the world, and hearing about that. And so interested. You just wish you could know what you should have asked.
Right.
I mean, so many things. I'm sure lots of people, including Grandmaster Strong, wish I'd asked Grandmaster Shin this, like,
right.
How many times did I sit across from him and never asked? And I remember there was this one time at Masters Camp, and this came up, and it just goes to show like how difficult it is not only to do this with our masters, but our family and your parents. And you're just like, well, what should I ask them? But it's hard to know. Mm-hmm. But we were having this conversation about t-shirt color, right? And there was this thing about, can you wear, like, should it just be white? If you're a brown belt, you can wear a brown t-shirt, blah, blah, blah. And Grandmaster Shin, he was a little miffed, and he was like, you could ask me, sort of like, I'm sitting right here, you guys are having this whole discussion. And he said, back in the day, we just wore a t-shirt, like, and it was sort of like, of course, because it wasn't like we had so many options, first world problem, what color shirt should I wear, was sort of was sort of his attitude to it. Like, didn't come up, you wore what shirt you had, you had a t-shirt and you wore it underneath.
Right.
So but these are the sorts of things, like, and I have so many questions, you don't ever know to ask, but like, we have like little variations in belt tying. Have you ever noticed? Like,
yes.
And it's like, who do we ask? Dang it! Why didn't I ask Grandmaster Shin? Why didn't I ask Grandmaster Goodwin at the time? Like, so. I mean, I guess you and I need to make a list.
Yeah, I do have a list. I can. Like I said, I've talked with Grandmaster Strong, and he has a list of people that he wants me to talk to, guys like Master Lorenzo, Master Valdez down in Mexico, guys along those lines. I talked to Master Ramirez, which was amazing hearing his story. Yeah, there's lots of people. Still, that's why it's a work in progress. You're
gonna have an amazing book one day.
Oh man.
Because
I know who I can edit it. Like, yeah, lose my number.
I don't know. I've been finding new people. The Qigong book was not edited by me, and so I'm finding more and more people. Turns out the association is rich with talent. So I'm ready to spread the pain.
That's right. So kind of going back to Coastal Canyon, and we haven't talked about your husband at all yet. You said that he predates your Tung Soo Do training. When did he get started? And you said he's now the chief instructor of Coastal Canyon.
Well, he actually, when we met, I was a new black belt, and he was interested in training martial arts, and I wasn't mature enough then, and I'm barely mature enough now to share my martial arts training. But especially as a new black belt and in a relatively new relationship. So he actually trained with Master Oshiman, has got a black belt under him in Shotokan. And so that makes him second generation Funakoshi, which is just, amazing. I think it's really, it goes back to what you and I talked about, like, how do you explain your passion for something? It took me a long time to be able to recommend martial arts to other people, because I thought, how can you explain something that's so personal? Like, I can't even tell you what drives me to do this, but it's like in your blood. And how can you expect that someone else that you meet randomly would have that passion? You know, kind of think about like how Master Godwin used to teach you to do the pitch. You know, you meet
Right.
somebody, you shake their hand, and I was like, how can you do that? How can you explain something that's so intangible, or like that you feel so passionately about, and how can you expect that some other individual will have that same experience? And I think it's difficult. You know, when you're on the floor training hard with people, it's very intimate. And like the relationship I have with my early instructors, with the Caltech crew, you are laid bare. They know your limits. They know your highs. They know your lows. I mean, it's such an intimate, raw experience. And I think that's why you end up being lifelong friends with the people that you really trained with. And so it's a challenge doing that, I think, with your family as well. I mean, really, you know, kudos to you to have, you know, your whole family in Tung Sido, but it's an intimate, passionate, intense experience. And I think I needed a lot more maturity. And I also thought it was so important for him to have that journey independently of me. And I'm really glad we did it that way. Of course, it cost some tons of time and seniority within Tung Sido. Right? And the only reason we came together is when we started a family, it just became untenable to have, you know, we're both in the sciences, you know, 2 STEM positions, 2, you know, me running my club and my training, and then his having separate training, and then a baby. Like, it just, no. and so then he, you know, and so then he was a red belt for 4 years.
Wow.
Because we had a new baby. So but now I can't imagine it otherwise, right? But we came there, you know, independently. You know, he's got his own Tung Sido identity. He's got his own martial arts identity, and I think that's really important. I think, but I mean, I guess I need that. I don't know. People have come to it different ways, but
No, I agree. So Erin started, she was a second degree. We started the same studio, but when I started, she was off. She trained at world headquarters at Shin Karate when she was in medical school. And when we first started dating, I was a black belt. She was a second degree. And we definitely came into it on our own. And then it just kind of worked once we started dating. We still have our own lanes that we're in as far as martial arts goes. We share similarities, but you know, I think like we complement each other really well if we teach together. So yeah, it would be hard to, well, it'd be hard to clone either of us, but it'd be hard to try to be like, hey, I'm going to do this too, just like you do. I was like, no, it doesn't work that way. So it's interesting that it's nice to have that base, have something different, right? Because then you can both come at the same issue different ways, and, you know, come to the same conclusion just from different paths. So I think it's awesome that you have that and you're able to do that. And you can tell me, it's not that long ago he finally received his master's rank, right? It's a couple of years ago.
Yes, yeah, right. He's started pre-COVID, but then I guess, you know, received, you know, did his second fourth on master's test during COVID. So
That's
in that phase.
right.
Luckily didn't have to do both years during COVID. I feel bad for people whose whole experience was during COVID. So
Yeah, that's tough.
but I'm curious, you know, you also have the perspective of having your kids, and how do you think that works in their developing their martial arts identity?
It's interesting because, you know, being an instructor for years, there are some instructors that can have their kids in class, and then others it's like, here's my kids, you teach them. And my kids are different. So one's 13, one's 11, and they just recently, after years of just doing martial arts, are starting to branch out. One's really into softball, one's into dance. But my 13-year-old this summer has really kind of taken she loves to come and help assist, you know, be an assistant instructor. And then she's like, well, I also want to get better at sparring. And I have my opinions in both, but it's interesting to try to not be like, well, you need to do it this way. And it's like, well, here's some ideas. Here's some ideas how to do it. Here's how your mom does it. Here's how Master Kaluzny does it. Luckily, like I'm one of the instructors, so I'm part of Evolution Karate Academy. Master Kaluzny owns it. So fortunately for her, she has other role models to look up to. Master Erwin Waters has been with us lately too, who's another amazing instructor. So luckily, I'm not the one that has to wholly point her in that direction, which is nice, right? Because she, like we talked about with partners, she has to come up with her own identity, as well as my youngest, the same. And they're both very different, and they ebb and flow, just like anyone does as far as martial arts goes. It's so interesting to me because I started when I was an adult. They've started when they were 4 years old, and I got a chance to watch some evaluation for Saddam, and one of the people was Lauren Peterman, who obviously both of her parents are masters, and I'm sure she started at that age. And it's so fascinating to me to see someone who literally just grew up in the martial arts. It's different. It's really different because, like you said before, you mentioned that how can you possibly expect someone else to understand your love and passion for the martial arts? Most people can't. They just can't do it. And a long time ago, I used to take it really hard when people quit martial arts. But then I realized, like, it's just not, everyone has a different level of dedication, and you know, sometimes it's just a season for someone, and it's hard for me to understand that because it's my life. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, it's hard. I try to not make her my daughter in class, but that's really hard too.
It is hard, and thinking about, you know, if one of them would want to quit, like what a challenge that would be, right? Like that would be. And I think you know, talk about like the phases. I get you. Like it used to be so hard for me. If someone left the association, it was just like, well, you're dead to me kind of thing.
Right.
I think I've matured past that, and you know, having somebody else not share my passion, you know, getting to the point where it's like, yeah, that doesn't threaten my passion or doesn't threaten my commitment. Like it's okay, you know, it's okay that you could feel really passionate about something and then, you know, move on. But it is kind of hard because I think, you know, like I've never been divorced. I can't imagine being divorced. You're probably the same way. Like it's sort of like the same thing. It's like, how can you love something and then not love it anymore? You know, it's like, and then, you know, over time it's like, oh, okay, you know, just because you know, I can get that now. You start to see, yeah. And And I think one of the things in this phase of my life that I'm really beginning to value is that my martial arts friendships aren't just martial arts friendships. Like those friendships can permeate wider, and that, you know, if I were to have a friend that were to decide to stop training, they could still, you know, they're still my friend. And and I think that's something I'm valuing with my age. I think the young me, like people were in boxes, you know, you had your science people and you had your martial arts people, and if they fell out of one box, then they just fell out of that box. And I think going back to, you know, valuing and realizing that time is short and experiences are sweet, there's no point in having the boxes. If there's somebody you jive with, then you know, you just keep them in your life as you can, while you can. You know, they still get you, even if they've moved on to do something else. They're still them, you're still you, and you guys, you know, you can still have a relationship that goes beyond oh, you're not going to regionals this year, or you're not going to worlds, you know. Yeah, no, that's okay. People can, we can still jive on other things.
Absolutely. Yeah, some of our two of our best friends, they got married they met through karate, and they probably stopped about 10 years ago, but they're still some of our best friends. And yeah, it's awesome. I say to my kids, it's like, you know, at this point, if you want to pursue other things and not do martial arts, you can, but just remember, you have to come to everything still. You still are going to be there. So you know, you can have fun. Obviously, that we have so many friends at this point when it comes to regionals. You talked about like inside and outside of the martial arts. Like, we just got back yesterday from New York City. We went with the Setiantos, Jeff and Anna Setianto are great friends, and our kids are the exact same age, and so they're growing up together, and it's awesome to see how well they get along, and you know, they can train together, and it's cool. I love this association, but at the same time, you know, I'm okay if people aren't in it anymore. That's fine too. So we are, I feel like we keep talking for hours, but I'm sure you have to start packing soon. Is there anything you would like to talk about that we haven't touched base on before we wrap up? I know we talked about Grandmaster Shin, we talked about the books. Anything in particular that you wanted to talk about before we finish?
Can't think of anything. I've really enjoyed this time, talk to you, getting to know you better. It's really, really fun. You know, thank you for doing this. I guess the only thing I would add is, you know, I wonder how we could have this experience, not just with masters. You know, one of the things that I think a lot about is how to make the association more and more accessible for our GUP students and our younger black belts, and really put the attention on them. And love to be able to do some spotlights. I mean, I just think we have so many amazing people. You know, maybe someone should, maybe not you, but maybe someone should take up the quest of like interviewing all the families of the year, or all that sort of thing. Like, you know, I bet there's just so many amazing people in this association, and would love to, you know, the bigger we get, you know, the harder it is, I think, to reach all the different people. And I'm hoping, you know, these interviews, I'm sure, well, I hope GUP students, you know, look at them and maybe as a way to reach them. And I guess that's the main thing, is, you know, let them know we're thinking about them too. You know,
Right.
It's not all about us and the history and stuff like that. I mean, we're trying to preserve history and preserve legacy. But, you know, when we're talking about like these tiny tigers and dragons that are turning into masters. I really think that the next generation of World Tongue Sado, this next era, is going to be better than the current one, and maybe the best yet. I think we may be entering just this new phase of superior, well-rounded martial arts exploration. I'm really looking forward to it.
I hope so too, but we're not going to make it easy on them to be better than us. We're going to make, at least personally, I'm going to make it work, and I know you are, because I've had the chance to train with you, or at least in class with you at Master's Clinic, and I did the Unsu class with you and Grandmaster Stein, and I personally know that you work as hard as anyone, if not more than most. So,
well, thank you for that.
We're not going to make it hard.
I do enjoy hard work.
Well, thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in person sooner than later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.